Do we have any, Dean?
Yeah. What's been really wonderful about our class, I think, is the breadth of experience of the rabbi and who she's brought in to teach us, but also the breadth of the participants in the class. So you are facing like writers from Broadway, published poets, new people to Judaism, some people who aren't even Jews. So there's a breadth of scholastic, theological, all kinds of folks that contribute. And what's really wonderful is that we all learn from each other. So I look forward to your teaching.
Dean is a fabulous artist, and she's done an interpretation Dean, have you done every single psalm we've done so far? Every single psalm, and Harold, who is our TA for the class, has done a video. Went to her studio and a video so all of us could see a little bit of this of the process itself of making the art. Shep.
Well, everybody said what I was going to say, but meeting people you never would have met, just all the outside people come in with all their knowledge and music and everything. And Rabbi, I have such respect. I had no idea the depth of knowledge. To me, it's incredible. But all these people, to me, it's kind of overwhelming. It really has made me a better Jew and a better person. I really love it. You always talked about Psalms. I didn't get it. Now I get it. And I appreciate everything, Rabbi, really.
Beautiful, Shep.
It's really life-changing. I love it.
Wonderful having you in the class. Lise Brown.
Hi, good morning. So I'm one of the composers of the musical offerings, and one of the things that really jumps out to me is that the different sentiments that gets and the different viewpoints really that gets expressed in the way that the music is. I wrote most recently I wrote a psalm, music to Psalm 15 and 16, and mine was very pretty and very flowing. And previously, Cantor Nieman had sung something to that same text that was very plaintive. It had such a different emotion to it than what I had written, and it's very interesting to me to see that emotional expression expressed musically, not only in the words, but just how you feel the song.
Which is, just going to say the Levites, sang these psalms, and my greatest dream would be to be able to go back in time and to hear the music of the psalms.
Yes, we've had some discussions about can we even know what that music might have been like? What was music? What did it sound like? Yep. Jack Nieman.
Good morning. Wait, is that my on?
Yes, we can hear you, Jack. Great, thank you.
For me, it was reconnecting, having moved away from New York and not having that physical experience in the 30th Street, but then to reconnect with the community and with you, Rabbi, and everyone, and then to get to know new people. And then to collaborate musically, which I did with
Totally.
Yes, sorry. Mm-hmm. And what I'm doing is going back and rereading the offerings, because in class they sort of go by very quickly. Yes, but when you go back and read them, they're really so amazing. And I've talked to a little bit in private messages with people, and I think it's such a deep connection that I think is so enriching to our daily lives. And it is, as Sarah said, a focal point. I look forward to it, and it's like, today's the last day, and like, now what are we going to do tomorrow? And it's so, you look forward to Monday. Anyway, I'm grateful, and I'm just grateful to be a part of it.
Great, thank you, Jack. And Jack is in Florida, by the way. So we have a whole group in the class from Florida now. Lori Krupman.
I ditto to everything that Donna said, the anchor, and what I would have done without this class this year. But I love the way the rabbi has given us permission to interpret the Psalms in our own way, and sometimes take just a phrase or a word that hits us and just go off on that, because some of them just didn't make any sense to me until I read and read and said, oh, that phrase. And then my interpretations are sometimes not at all what other people would read the psalm as. So thank you for the permission to read it in our own way.
And I just want to repeat, it's not my personal permission, it's the permission of our tradition. It is exactly I'm just communicating to you something which has not been adequately communicated, which is that this is what it is to be a Jew, is to take a text and to make it our own. And unfortunately, we've been so alienated from so many of the texts. But so I'm grateful, Lori, that you've gotten that. And I consider myself to be a conduit from what is a deep Jewish value. So I'm glad that it came to you. Harold Levine. Harold has been our indefatigable TA for this class, which has really made it possible to happen in many different ways. And we have a member who has been kind of an assistant TA, also made so much happen in this class, Annika Cooper, because all the organizing of all of the different offerings, and not to mention sending out emails with all of the texts. We have encouraged everybody to buy the books to the extent possible, and we have quite a bibliography of books. But Harold, now off to you.
Well, I think that sometimes your prayers are answered in strange ways. I think I'd been praying for a long time for a way to study Psalms deeply. And it took a global pandemic to bring me that time, because the thought that
So
we
you're responsible, Harold, huh?
yeah, we could have spent an hour a day, 45 minutes a day, 4 days a week studying Psalms with this intensity is something I never could have imagined. When I went through my bookcase in preparation for beginning this class, I realized that I had over the time bought like 10 books of Psalms or books about Psalms, but never really sat down with them. So this has been a once in a lifetime opportunity. And as someone who goes to a morning minyan and goes to Friday evening services and Saturday evening services, I'm like the character in Moliere who didn't realize that he'd been speaking prose his entire life. I didn't realize that I had been praying Psalms every time I was at a service until I started studying the Psalms and became more sensitive to looking at exactly where the text in the Siddur came from and how much of our Siddur is actually just made up of Psalms.
Beautiful. Sally or Lynn, I'm not sure which one of you.
We just want to say that, the Psalms class was rooted in fear and anxiety. When this Psalms class began, none of us knew where we were heading. And the class for Sally and I speak for both of us, has really been like that chuppah of peace and protection throughout these months. And we're very, very grateful. Thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you. And I think, Ira, we're going to end with you before we begin the class. So you have the last word.
Oh, the last word. Thank you.
Well, the last word for now.
Very good.
Okay. I mean, I won't, I can echo a lot of things a lot of people have already said, but I want to say two things that are more personal, which are that when the Psalms class started is about the same time that my husband, Kenneth, came down with COVID and was quite ill. I mean, I think he was sicker than we had even realized. And I know that, Psalms are traditionally said in times of that kind of, sickness and praying for help. I probably would not have sat down and read Psalms every day if it hadn't been for this class during that time. So that became a very, very meaningful thing for me. And I think for Kenneth too. He's sitting to my right, so he he nodded yes. The other thing is that, and I've shared this in class too, that I have a meditation practice that's rooted in Eastern Tibetan Buddhism, and now a little Zen. And this class has really opened up a door for me to be able to see where things overlap and how things relate from one tradition to the other, where they depart. And it's been very, very meaningful for me in that way. And I really have appreciated that, Rabbi.
Beautiful. Thank you. So thank you for all of those and comments, and to help our guest teacher today have a little bit of a sense of the journey we've been on, which I think has been a miraculous journey, and it has been a way of creating a teva, an arc through the tsunami we've all been living through, and hopefully experiencing the Psalms in this deeper way. And through the time, we've also looked at some specific themes in Psalms. We have taken a break from our journey through from 1, and now we're starting 20, to study a few special Psalms. Like yesterday we did Psalm 67, the Psalm for the Omer, and we did during Elul, Psalm 27, and we've studied the Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat, and then the Psalms of Hallel. So we've done some to get a sense of also where they sit in other ways. But I'm thrilled today that we have Rabbi Simcha Weintraub, whom I've known for many, many, many years, and he has been a very important voice in the rabbinical world, not just here in New York, but really as of our generation, to see healing as a central part of the role that our tradition must play. And in this particular moment in history in which his word has been so important, he of course used Psalms and explored Psalms in a profound way. So as I mentioned, he wrote this book, which I know many of you have gotten, although it wasn't always easy for people to find, so many of you have it. So we're thrilled to have him today. And when we hit Psalm 16, which is the first of the 10 Psalms of the Tikkun HaKlali, that's when I introduced the concept itself of the Bratslav 10 Psalms. And I promised I would try to see, with Sarah Sloan's help, thank you, Sarah, to get Simcha Weintraub here with us today. And so we're going to have a conversation where I'm going to ask questions and he's going to respond. And as always, if you have questions during the conversation, put them in chat, and then Harold will help after we finish the conversation between Simcha Weintraub and myself. We'll open it up and have questions and clarifications and things like that. We have actually a member of the class, Ruth Berman. Are you here today? Who, I don't know is Ruth on our list today? I don't know if you could see if Ruth is here.
I don't see her yet.
Okay, Ruth and her late partner Connie Kurtz. Connie had a son who at age 12 became a Bratslav Chassid from Brooklyn, and now lives in Tveria with 14 or 15 kids and grandchildren, and is a lovely, lovely soul. So we have a direct connection in our class, the Bratslav Hasidim, but and I've met him on many occasions, and that's a whole other story. But anyway, so we have a little bit of that personal connection. But Simcha Weintraub, how nice to see you. It's been a long time. So why don't you start by describing a little bit of your career and what you've done in this world, and then we'll start with the questions I have for you.
Okay, thank you very much. I feel like I've missed something. I've really missed a great year of study with you, and I'm sorry I've missed all these incredible sessions. But I'll just say I'm Simcha Weintraub. I'm a rabbi and a social worker by training, and it's important to say that because my drive was to somehow integrate the two. In other words, not to split up the human being with the spiritual over here and the mental health over here and the physical over here, but really to do something more holistic. By the way, I'm sorry about upstairs. They're rehabilitating the apartment above, so if you hear noise, I'll try and talk up, which is not my usual way of speaking. Anyway, after graduating from the seminary and from Columbia Social Work School, I did an assortment of things. I was the first director of public affairs for the New Israel Fund for 8 years. That's when it was a very small organization. And I taught at the Heschel School. And while I was doing those things, I was part-time studying to be a family therapist. So all that stuff I wanted to stir together. I guess I have to say something about the Jewish healing movement with a small m. God forbid it's not another movement, but it was an effort in the late 80s and early 90s, really in great measure in response to AIDS, to put suffering on the Jewish agenda and on the Jewish community's, attention. The feeling was that Jewish spiritual resources were not accessible to people who were suffering, and people were turning to other faith traditions and kind of in despair, and a feeling like the Jewish community and the Jewish tradition were not a place to be sick. And and so what we wanted to do is to mine the Jewish tradition for its healing wisdom. That's one of the lines we used, and to make resources accessible from the tradition. So like you've been doing with Psalms, that's one of the things we wanted to do. And I have to tell a very brief apocryphal story, which is like 3 sentences. So let me just find them. Okay. A major New York City building.
Can I just ask you, do you have headphones? Because I think if you wear headphones to attach to the computer, it might cut down on that.
Or even earbuds.
Or earbuds? You might not.
Neither.
Okay, no problem. Keep going. We'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I'll have to enter the 21st century soon. Anyway, a major New York City building was being dedicated, and among the many dignitaries present was Chancellor Louis Finkelstein of the Jewish Theological Seminary, sitting next to a noted Jewish philanthropist. The opening invocation blessing was offered by a Protestant minister who included in his words a stirring reading of a psalm in English translation. When he finished, the wealthy woman leaned over to Chancellor Finkelstein and whispered, "Wasn't that moving? I wish we had that in our Bible." And it really points to what some of you have said, which is that this incredible book of 150 compositions has been sitting there on the bookcase, and what do you do with it? And that was really my feeling about my seminary education, is, so what do we do with these things? I'm happy to say that the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College is one of the places where they started bringing the pastoral education people together with the Midrash teachers or the Talmud teachers and Jewish history teachers into the same room, and kind of weaving stuff together. In other words, to get the perspectives on because it's kind of wrong to take a strictly academic biblical scholarship approach to the Psalms. It kind of betrays their origins and their music. So the purpose of the Jewish Healing Center, as I said, was to mine the Jewish library and the Jewish history for its healing wisdom. We besides having resources that were meaningful and usable, I found in my early work at the Jewish Healing Center of New York that people also wanted a direction. They wanted to know what to do when confronting serious illness and also bereavement. They want to know what do I do? And so when I discovered Reb Nachman's Tikkun HaKlali, I was actually searching for what I now have been referring to as Jewish spiritual treatment plans. I uncovered Reb Nachman's Tikkun HaKlali, and I was really honored to be visited by Avram Greenbaum, who was at the time an important leader of the Breslaver Hasidim, the Breslav Hasidim in Jerusalem. He worked for the BBC and was a secular Jew, made Aliyah, became a Breslaver, and showed up in my office in this beautiful gray Hasidic outfit, light gray, and with his white hair and white beard, it was really like the Mashiach had come, and he was incredibly helpful to me in figuring out what this tikkun klali, what this complete remedy was about. Maybe later, if it's of interest, I can do a screen share with the 7 Jewish spiritual treatment plans that I've used in my work. But what the Jewish Healing Center was about was, in terms of the actual work, was about Jewish spiritual support groups that were co-led by a specially trained rabbi and social worker or mental health professional, and these continue. The first one was for Jews with AIDS in the San Francisco area, led by Rabbi Nancy Flam, one of the mothers of the Jewish healing movement, upstairs. And we would incorporate, in fact, texts into our support groups. Is that too noisy?
It's such a sign of the times we're in, right? That we all have to live with all these different sounds we have. I have these big motorcycles that go doing wheelies right by my apartment. So that's adding a certain texture to our driving services.
Hopefully it'll be over.
What?
Hopefully it will end soon. I'll just say to you all that for 2 weeks, they actually put us up in a hotel during the day, the co-op did, because they knew that I couldn't take my Parkinson's exercise classes with this noise on Zoom. So anyhow, so that's where we find ourselves.
Okay, yeah. So how did you decide to actually do the book? Can you tell us about doing this book?
Sure. So one thing was I was trying to figure out how to what resources we needed to make accessible. Where was the first place to start? So I became full-time with the Jewish Healing Center in 1995, but in 1991 we came up with this idea. I came up with this idea of bringing together 10 rabbis of the 4 different denominations at the time, and have them write a personal bridge to the psalm, not an academic bridge, but imagining that they were talking to somebody who was suffering, find something of meaning and deliver it. And that was quite a project. It took 3 years to get these rabbis to do it. I won't mention which one, but one very renowned and wonderful rabbi, when I was bothering him to get his piece in, he said, "You said it was due in February." And I said, yes, 1992. And anyway, I have to say that in the back of our minds was also not just to give a usable resource that was from the tradition, but to, like you've been doing in the class, to get different voices from different places. And also, we thought of the Jewish Healing Center, to be very honest, as a force that could help with the healing of the Jewish community. And that very much is one reason why Rabbi Nancy Flam started with the spiritual support group, the first Jewish spiritual support group for Jews with AIDS, because the alienation that so many people felt from the tradition, from the community, needed to be healed. And as a matter of fact, the relationships among the different denominations was also needed healing. One rabbi described to me at a conference that what the Jewish healing movement was about, in his opinion, was the re-embodiment of Judaism. That Judaism, the spirituality that Judaism was offering was not connected to the body. There was not movement, and there was not breathing, and there was not expressive, as you've talked about, expressive arts, and so that was another aspect of it. And I'll just say one other thing. Yeah, I just want to identify that I'm also somebody who grew up with the Psalms. I went to an Orthodox yeshiva. My father's from Poland, and was a traditional rabbi, but extremely progressive. And I actually I realized once that I knew the Ashrei before I knew the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, and that when I had to check on the Hebrew alphabet, I would have to say the Ashrei. But I also didn't, when I got sick, my first serious illness was type 1 diabetes. When I got that during rabbinical school, I didn't turn to the Psalms. And then I got thyroid cancer and I didn't turn to the Psalms. So when I opened that door, I found something really, a real window to healing in the broadest sense. Okay, so maybe that's why how I decided to do the book.
I'm muted. So let's just make sure everybody knows what are the Tikkun HaKlali and who was Nachman. I mean, we've done a tiny bit about it. So just yeah.
Sure.
What does it mean Tikkun HaKlali and who was Nachman?
Okay, so Reb Nachman, as you probably been told, it was the great grandson of the progenitor of Hasidism, the Baal Shem Tov. Reb Nachman lived from 1772 to 1810, although some say 1811. From his early youth, he was different. He wanted to set a distinctive path, really, and it wasn't an intellectual decision. It was deeply spiritual and emotional. And you have to think about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob for a second. So Abraham starts the hardware business, and Isaac takes it over and kind of continues in his father's mode. In fact, even echoes his father's way of doing business. But along comes Jacob, the grandson, and takes the business in new directions and really expands the business. So then what happens? What happens with the great grandson? The great grandson has to make some radical shifts. In fact, to leave the hardware business, and not to have a dynasty, as a matter of fact. So that's the way I've digested who Reb Nachman was. And I have a cousin's son who became he was an architect. And while he was studying at Pratt, he became a Bratslav Chassid. And he now teaches architecture at Bezalel School in full Hasidic garb. Anyway, so Reb Nachman, let me just say a couple other things about him before I talk about the Tikkun. He was very much committed to ascetic study, solitary meditation, and like a lot of Hasidim, classical Hasidim, fiery worship, really. And some of you know his nature prayer, which if you don't have, I'll share with you. And his prayer for peace has become a part of many Sidurim. What his Hasidim really drew from him was a lifelong quest for teshuvah, for atonement, how a person of faith cannot be in despair. And there's a great argument on the conservative rabbi's chat room about whether Reb Nachman was known to have said, "Mitzvah gedolah liot b'simcha tamid." It is a great mitzvah to be joyous always. And there was a great argument over Ravnet whether that was actually a mitzvah. And they couldn't take it at face value, like what he was saying. They had to analyze whether it was a mitzvah. So he actually was in Eretz Yisrael, in the Holy Land, for a while, but he was quite controversial, and he ultimately settled in Breslov in 1810 and died very young, unfortunately, of illness. So that's a good introduction to him. It's a very complicated family tree. If you look at the Besh, the Baal Shem Tov, there's second wives and third husbands, So, but I'm working on that because I like to make family genograms. Now the Tikkun HaKlali, out of his suffering, and that includes something I know that a lot or all of you know, which is kind of sexual or emotional suffering of all kinds, and probably conflicts that we don't even know about. And Art Green has written about this in his great biography, The Tormented Master, about Reb Nachman. But out of it came a complete repair, as I say, a Jewish spiritual treatment plan for how to recover or be in recovery, and it has 4 elements, which you may have read about in the book, and I'll just quickly name them for you. The one that we're talking about today is the Psalms, the 10 Psalms. If I asked you to read all 150 Psalms and pick out 10 that are healing, I doubt that you would pick the 10 that Reb Nachman picked. But this might be a screen share, but I don't want to take the time. He draws on, he clearly was drawing on the statement in the Talmud, in the book Psachim, the tractate Psachim 117a. I'll just read it to you. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, "The book of Psalms was uttered with 10 synonyms of praise: Nitzuach, victory; Nigun, melody; Maskil, instruction; Mizmor, psalm; Shir, song; Ashrei, happy; Tehillah, praise; Tefillah, prayer; Hodaya, thanksgiving; and Hallelujah." And so one can go through the Psalms and identify those 10 kind of synonyms of praise, or I would say maybe dimensions of praise in the 10 Psalms that he picked. But there's something else that I want to say about that, which is a wonderful woman wrote me years ago, and then she contacted Avraham Greenbaum in Jerusalem, a woman from Toronto. I'm trying to look for the piece of paper, but she identified the 10 Psalms with the 10 Sfirot of Kabbalistic thought. So for example, Psalm 16 is identified with Keter, and Psalm 32 with Chokhmah, wisdom, and Psalm 41 with Binah, understanding, and the other. So that's another aspect of it, is that it's reflective of the 10 spheres, the 10 Sfirot. But I happen to think that the number 10 also is about the minyan. And Reb Nachman, as I said, was an ascetic. He liked going out alone into the woods, and that the 10 Psalms for him were a portable minyan, spiritual minyan, if you will, or a textual minyan, or a singing minyan. And finally, I think even that there was a rebelliousness in Reb Nachman, where he didn't want to just have the Jewish life of halacha, of do this and don't do that. He wanted to have a Jewish life of exploration, and of inner exploration, and of transgenerational over time. And so the 10 Psalms are a form of the 10 Commandments, but they are a 10. It's almost like, I feel like the halacha, the Jewish law, is prose, and the 10 Psalms are poetry. and they're just different approaches to, but that's Simcha Weintraub going off on a riff.
So what do we know why he chose these 10? Because I agree with you. If you were to, they would not be the 10 I would choose for this purpose. So what do we know about? Do we have any sense of, does he write or speak about why he chose these 10, or we don't know?
No, Reb Nosson, his scribe, says some things about it, but it's not nobody says authoritatively. There's speculation, and I think what, somebody said it when you were going around, that you can find anger, right? The psalm that says to smash the children the children of the oppressors against the wall, and you can find, huh?
We did that psalm.
We did that psalm, yeah. What a challenge.
Yeah.
And then you can find joy. You can find insecurity, and so I think he had his own sense of what kind of the chorus should be. The total chorus should include all these.
I see. So I want to point out, I know that a lot of you have the class, have the book, but for those of you who don't, so you could see the structure of the book itself, if you could see the pages. So Simcha has done exactly what we're trying to do in the class, in that we have the original Hebrew and English, and then there's the commentary, the writing by the, each psalm has a different Jewish leader, Rabbi, Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist, one for each psalm, writing an essay about what that psalm means for that one person spiritually. So it's kind of like if each of us published our own book, took the psalm, and then had the essay or interpretation or offering. In this case, they're all prose, but it's kind of like the comments that everybody makes about why they're writing what they're writing. Each person is doing it, and they are very, very, very different because they're coming from such different places. But by having the original there with the English, you're going back and forth between the psalm itself and some interpretation. And so it has, as I said, has some of the leading Orthodox rabbis, from all the different denominations. So that itself is quite moving. And on page 103 of the book is the list exactly that he referred to of both the 10. I've referred to that sometimes in the class, these 10, which we've now seen many of these words in the superscription, the first sentence of many of the Psalms, Lamanatseach, etc. The 10 different ways of praising God that's found in the Psalm, and then the list of the 10 sfirot, the Kabbalistic spheres of spiritual activity. So that's right here in the book. This book, it was published in what year? It's just so
27 years ago, 1994.
It remains really it's a very prominent book on my bookshelf, and a very beautiful expression of a contemporary look at the Psalms. So we distributed yesterday the Wikipedia article that says that Nachman did all of this in response to his anxiety about nocturnal emissions. So can you just talk about that and how that might not be our primary concern? And by the way, Art Green does talk about one of his conclusions, though there's nothing can be conclusive, of course. Art Green has some questions about whether Nachman himself struggled with homoerotic tendencies, and he has a lot of anti-body stuff. He has a lot of anxiety about body stuff, a lot of anxiety about sex. And there's some reasons to believe in that. And this is a very pre-modern time, so even the language is hard to pin down. But that maybe a lot of his anxiety and despair was connected to some self-hate about feelings he himself had. Obviously, there's no absolute, and I'd say Art Green is probably the leading non-Hasidic scholar of Nachman. And I've mentioned his book way back when we were at Psalm 16. Who knows how long ago that was? And his book, which is kind of a beautiful spiritual Jewish biography of Nachman, is really the book that exists in English that most deeply gets to Nachman's spirit, what we can know spiritually about him. And as I mentioned then, exactly what Simcha referred to, Nachman would speak on Shabbos, and of course, nothing could be written down on Shabbos. And his students, one in particular, as soon as Shabbos ended, would write down. This was a common practice in the Hasidic world, by the way. This is that soon as it was possible to write, somebody had the job of listening to the rabbi speak and understanding that their job when Shabbos ended was to write it down as fast as possible. And that it was usually spoken in Yiddish, but usually written down in Hebrew ultimately, which is a whole other topic, which goes back to the Yiddish class I'm teaching, but that's for another day. But so everything we have that Nachman wrote, he actually didn't write. They were all spoken shiurim lessons and stories, and then they were written down. And much of what he did write that we think he wrote, he burned before he died. He ordered his students to destroy, on his deathbed, he ordered his students to destroy anything that was written of his after his death. So he's a very complicated character and a very interesting, but he really struggled. And I think that's a part of what comes through in the Tikkun HaKlali. He himself knew what despair was. He himself knew what it was to struggle with sadness and maybe self-hate, and maybe as a gay man self-hate in a world that could not be real. We can never know for sure, but that's one of our greens. And his thing that we needed to find a way to express our sadness so that the rest of the time we could understand that joy was a goal in life, that we shouldn't give in only to that. Anyway, so thoughts, Simcha?
Thank you.
Responses to that, or did I say everything okay?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you very much. The nocturnal emissions thing, just to respond a little bit about that. I think I'm one of those people who is pretty certain that he struggled with his homoerotic feelings and with that identity. I think that actually, when I asked Art Green to be one of the 10 rabbis and contribute a personal commentary on one of the Psalms, he said that he couldn't because of that connection. He couldn't get that out of his mind. And he was sincerely saying that. But I thought, well, if this is somebody dealing with something really, really difficult in the setting in which he lived, in the world in which he lived, and he came up with this beautiful remedy of nature and Psalms and drawing on the experience of good people and how they dealt with their suffering, and tzedakah, not just in the sense of writing a check to UJA Federation or Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, but in terms of doing tzedek and chesed with other people. This is a multi-dimensional and brilliantly balanced spiritual treatment plan. And so, and people were shocked to hear that Judaism, recommends nature, and I'll never forget. I have so many stories from over the years, but one Orthodox woman who came to see me, who was diagnosed with breast cancer. She was an attorney and very warm and brilliant and accomplished, and she was, as I say, Orthodox, and she was looking for a path. And every morning she took a 2-mile walk in the woods. And I just felt like she's got it, and she actually taught me about finding a way to healing. And so it involves, the nature part is very important. And I think that he was struggling with nature and wanted to make peace with nature and wanted to draw on nature and identify with nature. And I think, so I think that's my response to the nocturnal emissions. I don't care.
Yeah, you don't care, you're right. And you can move on from it. And that's part of what we've been teaching in studying the Psalms. It's fun to decode the Hebrew, and I love the grammar and studying the poetic, mechanisms and all of that to try and get so closely as we can to the original. But then at some point it becomes up to us to really embrace what it means for us. And just to clarify what Simcha was talking about in terms of nature, I mentioned this also, which I'm not sure folks remember, that Nachman and Bratslav Hasidim continue to do this to this day. They go out, the one of the features of Bratslav Hasidim is that they go out into nature. They're obligated by Nachman's teachings, and they very much want to do whatever Nachman said. They're called the dead Hasidim because there is no dynasty. There were no Rebbes after Nachman died, so they're kind of taunted a little bit as worshiping a dead Rebbe, Hasidic Rebbe. But they have leaders, but they don't have a Rebbe. They don't have a dynasty. And he said part of the job of a human being is to go out into nature for an hour a day, and in your vernacular, whatever language, not Hebrew, which is radical, right? So not Hebrew, so it had to be a language you understood. And in Europe, by the way, if you're in my Yiddish class, I described the differences between the north part of Eastern Europe and the southern part of Eastern Europe. Nachman was very much from the southern part of Eastern Europe, where Hasidism was so widespread. And he said, you've got to go out into the nature for an hour a day and in your vernacular express your deepest despair to God directly. I thou, go right, speak to God, tell God the heaviest things that weigh your heart down. But the other 23 hours, you have to experience joy. You can't let it crush you all the time. And I told this story, I'm not sure if folks remember that, when I studied Bratslav Chassidut with Art Green when I was in rabbinical school, and he told the story, which I love so much. Simcha, I'm sure you've heard him, because he loves this story. He spoke with, what's his name, the guy who's the head of the Jerusalem Bratslav Chassidim, whom you mentioned, and said to him, so do the Chassidim today still do this? It's called hitbadadut, this practice. Do they still do it every day? He said, yeah, but it's a contemporary world, so we do it for 50 minutes now. It's the therapy hour. They don't do the full hour. They do the 50 minutes or 45 minutes. And that's where nature comes in, that he said that no matter where you live, you need to go out where you're somehow connected to nature to express this level of despair. So are there any particular entries that you want to point to, folks? I know people are going to be, and we're recommending people read the book, and we'll refer to what, if we looked at this, as we get to different Psalms, but the next one isn't until 32. So the introduction is beautiful, and to read through the essays on each Psalm is really quite beautiful. Any entries that you want to point out, or things that are particularly interesting just to be noting of in the book?
So that question was difficult for me because again, we wanted this chorus of voices, and I feel like I'm kind of protective of all my children.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So, but I want to just point out to folks the range, and to when you read them, look, there are notes on who they are in the back, and please, try and note, wow, that's an Orthodox rabbi is saying that. That might be very surprising if you have some stereotypes about how an Orthodox rabbi. I found them very moving, and of course the particular Orthodox rabbis are the ones who are quite open, but it was still very moving. All right, so let's see if there are, I think we've covered what you and I discussed. So let's see, we have 5 minutes left. Harold, can you maybe look through the questions and see if there's something that you can digest that we can ask in our last 5 minutes?
Been quite a discussion in chat, and I've posted the books that were mentioned on the Facebook page. I'm waiting for a hand to go up. I'll ask a question. Rabbi Weinberg, I participated in the bereavement support group at the Jewish Board of Family and Children's Services that I now, listening to you, seems to have been based on your program here. Was that true? Because it was an amazing program that I participated in.
Yes. They don't do that anymore. When I retired last July, I actually took 2 of the groups with me privately because they were not going to continue. So we have a group that's been going for 21 years for Jews who've lost someone to suicide. It's called Makom Shalom, and we, as possible, we integrate Jewish spiritual material, and a group for bereaved parents who lost young adult children, which has been going for about 15 years. and so yes, but the one you took part in was part of the Jewish Healing Center.
So the JBFCS basically took the Jewish Healing Center into JBFCS.
Yes, in 1997.
This was Rabbi Weintraub's baby from the beginning, and then it was really his brilliant contribution to the Jewish world.
Thank you. The problem is the brilliant contribution wasn't funded.
Yeah,
So
it doesn't make it less brilliant. It just shows some of the inadequate priorities in the Jewish world, which we have a lot to talk about. But
Lise
Harold.
Brown has her hand up. Lisa.
Hi, good morning. So I'm wondering how necessary despair is for this process to begin.
Yeah. I think you know how you're often not aware of an injury unless you have pain. I think that the despair is part of the reclamation of hope, and you know the famous saying, "Those who mourn Jerusalem will live to celebrate its renewal." You know, the muscles that we use, the spiritual muscles that we use to despair and to experience suffering, are the very ones that we need to recover and to return to joy. So I think that despair is part of the journey, and the trick actually is to name it. I guess taming by naming. It's to give it its place, and but not let it overshadow or override everything else. The gratitude and the blessings.
Regina Linder.
Yes, good morning. It's important to remember that Rabbi Weintraub, and I'm blanking on the date, but it was among the darkest days of the AIDS crisis, brought the work of the Healing Center to CBST. We had several remarkable services, and it was also, that was across synagogues. It was among the earlier opportunities to welcome the mainstream world of New York synagogues into Bethune Street, where we had SRO crowds that day. So it's wonderful to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. I want to just give credit to my rabbinic intern at the time, who's now Rabbi Michael Latz, and he was a coach, or he's been the leader in Minnesota of all kinds of stuff, and national leader in Trua. So anyway, he was the intern who helped me put a lot of that stuff together. So thank you, Regina.
Well, I want to thank you very much. Harold, is that it? Are we?
That's it for the hands, yes.
Okay, so we are at our end time, and I just want to thank you so much. This has been just fantastic, and I could show the book and talk about it, but it's nothing like having you, and you've been such a deep contributor to the Jewish world and to the understanding of Psalms as spiritual practice. So I'm so grateful to you for being with us today.
It's my honor, and I always love coming to CBST in any way I can, by Zoom or any other way, and you know, God bless everybody for the community you've developed and the traditions you've carried on. So thank you, Sharon.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back with Psalm 20 on Monday.